أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I would like to welcome you all to this new session of Friday Talk, and I would also like to thank Dr. Yusuf Al-Rawahy, Sheikh Hafidh Al-Rawahy, and Sister Sheikh Al-Tawqi for arranging these talks regularly and for inviting me to do it this time. Our topic today is finding God through reason, countering new atheist narratives. Why this topic? Because we have noticed Muslim youth in the West and in the Muslim world are turning towards atheism. Alhamdulillah, so far it's not a massive movement of Muslims becoming atheists compared to Christians, for example, but certainly it should be an issue of our concern because it's affecting some Muslim families and Muslim communities. Now, the new atheist narratives that are claimed to be hinged on science, but are also linked to Western liberalism, issues of feminism, issues of women, issue of sexuality, same-sex marriage, and things like that, issue of minorities, issue of domestic violence. So they're using these kind of issues, and some of these issues are affecting among educated Muslims by creating doubts or shubuhat about Islam and Islamic values. Post 9/11 attacks, these new atheists, they found a fresh target for their criticism on religion, Islam and Muslims, which is the last bastion or fortress of sacredness and devotional life after they deconstructed Christianity. So we should be very much concerned about the impact of the ideas and narratives on Muslim youth, because they will affect moral resolve of the individuals and the communities at large. Because shubuhat or doubts, they cause sometimes loss of certainty or yaqeen in the teachings of Islam, but also the commitment or thibat of their practices, of their devotional life. New atheists also impact dawah. So for those who are involved in inviting non-Muslims to Islam, because their arguments, the atheist arguments against God, against religion, and against Islam in particular, are in the air within the Western, discourse. So it becomes a barrier for those who consider Islam. So we need to counter, their ideas and their narratives, especially, these coming from these atheist celebrities, the four horsemen. You can see a picture there. You have Richard Dawkins, you have Sam Harris, you have the philosopher, what his name, Daniel Dennett, and you have Christopher Hitchens, who died recently, but he has been replaced now by another horseman. What is his name? Lawrence Krauss. These are when you listen to these guys, and their books are becoming bestsellers. A lot of people, millions, are reading their books and being affected. And the way they promote atheism as if it is a universal idea, it is commonsensical, it's natural, it is rational, and it represents a default state of mind that all humans can accept only if they reflect. So we really need to counter their rhetoric. But there is a confidence issue among Muslims, even with those involved in dawah, when it comes to address atheism. There is always a kind of hesitation or fear in dealing with atheism, mainly because new atheists have projected themselves as the brightest intellectuals. And therefore, this is kind of a little bit intimidating for some. So we need to fight that lack of confidence in ourselves and the fear of addressing the new atheism through education and information. We need to realize that atheism is not something that deserves our respect as an intellectual enterprise. Their narratives are not reasonable and can be countered. Only we need to, to immerse a little bit in this. So we plan to deliver a series of talks on atheism under the title Finding God Through Reason, Countering New Atheist Narrative. I don't know how many, but immediately we have about, with this one, I have 2 talks in the pipeline, but more need to be developed, inshallah. The talks will provide a broad treatment of the subject of atheism, covering its development and adoption in the West, as well as its propagation to the rest of the world, with the aim to have a better understanding of how its core ideas came about. We hope this will help us to respond correctly to the new atheism. Now, this picture will give you a summary of historical development of atheism in the West. We will have a separate talk in the near future, inshallah, on the history. This is just a sort of a highlight. What I would like to drive here, home is atheism. It didn't just parachute itself out of nowhere. It has a history. It has nearly 400 years of history. Now, it started in 16th century, because before that, Europe was very much religious. And there was atheism all the way, if you go back to the Greek classical time, but it was not like the atheism of today, because the idea of believing in gods and God or gods, in plural, and the idea of believing in some supernatural, beings, it was there in parallel with the paganism. But, today where people totally reject anything that is unseen, it is something very specific to this new atheism, the Western atheism. Also, an important point is to remember, atheism did not develop in the, in the Muslim world. We will talk about atheism, the ideas of similar to atheism in the Muslim world, but it didn't develop organically in the Muslim world. It is an imported thing from the West. So really, atheism developed in the West. If you discount atheism in the East, in religions like Buddhism, because Buddhism is an atheistic religion. So if we look at the history in general, in the 16th century, that was a time where they had the birth pangs of atheism, because people, they developed doubts about religion, and they were very skeptic about the Bible. They broke away from tradition and the church authority. All of this within the shadow of Reformation movement. And for Muslims, I think we need to be careful. Those Muslims who consider themselves as a modernist, they tell us about, we should not focus on hadith. Hadith has a lot of problems. We need just to focus on the Quran. We need to translate the Quran in the light of, modern science and things like that. We should break away from the history of exegesis. Why should we rely on how, people 1,000 years ago, the way they understood the Quran? Why don't we look at the Quran in the fresh view? All of this is the beginning of developing these atheistic ideas, because that's how it went in Europe. Exactly. So that was the 16th century. 17th century, they developed many theories. The Christian thinkers themselves to with intention initially to kind of restore confidence in religion. So you have new theories of epistemology, where knowledge can only come from science. So they rejected the scriptures, new theories on ontology. The universe is run like a mechanical clock. God created it, but then he left it on its own. He doesn't interfere with it. And also new rules on morality, because they started saying God is not interested in what we do. This is something moral. We can decide ourselves. Through our own understanding and culture arrangement and things like that. So eventually they were creating a secular base to undermine it. Atheism, it went to maturity in the 18th and 19th century when scientism, or fully confidence and reliance on science, it took place, and especially with the new theories of Darwinian evolution to explain about life and organisms and all these creatures, how they came about, including human being. And the theories, because of the telescope, they could gaze the cosmos, and therefore they developed the science of cosmology to explain about the universe, how it came about. So all of this, gave them the maturity. They thought at that point there was no need for God and religion, because now we can explain everything through science. And they started to attack and to bash on religion. Then in 20th century, we saw death of atheism, because the promised utopia of atheism, it didn't materialize, it failed. We had world wars, major world wars, development and use of weapons of mass destruction, massive genocide of, regimes of Marxists and the communists, China, Russia. You had the Nazis and the fascism, Italians. You had perpetual military conflicts in order to support the capitalist system. And then you had major environmental disasters, because science, it turned out to be not only producing some good things for humanity, but also it has caused a lot of destructions as well. And this is where when they turn to postmodernity and nihilistic delusion, of people like Nietzsche and other philosophers. So the 20th century, really atheism died. But 21st century, the dead body, it has been resuscitated as a new atheism. And it is just a poorly rehashing of the old atheistic ideas and refuted arguments. Many of the arguments are already refuted, actually. And the new atheists, they ignore the past failures, and they just plunge into militarism or militant and crazy bigotry, arrogance, and Islamophobia. So this is where we are today. So what is new atheism? New atheism is a term that was coined to describe the new position that was pushed by the 21st century atheists. And it was really crowned by Sam Harris. This is an American neuroscientist or neurosurgeon who turned into a philosopher in his 2004 book, in response to 9/11 attacks, The End of Faith, Religion, Terror, and the Future Reason. Now, what are their premises? Because these are the things that we need to understand in order to counter them. They base on a naturalist worldview, meaning the physical world is all there is. They reject all kind of unseen. Science is the only means of understanding reality. So they reject, the Quran, they reject the Bible, they reject all kind of scriptures, and they're projecting themselves as being very intellectual and focused on the use of reason. Morals and ethics are not from God or religion. Science can explain everything. Sam Harris has very strange idea of explaining morality through science. Even some of, fellow atheists, they will not agree with him. Faith is just a hypothesis, as making truth claims. So must be empirically tested, and be rejected on the grounds of insufficient evidence. Religion is wrong, irrational, not needed, and should be banned. Islam is violent and dangerous, must be defeated at any cost. Societies should stop teaching children religion because it fosters prejudice and violence, and they support military interventions to defeat religion when civilized world is under threat. Sam Harris and the guy who died, what is his name, Hitchens, Christopher Hitchens, they were the biggest supporters and promoters and campaigners for the intervention in Iraq after 9/11. So that was just an introduction, and this is our agenda. I have prepared 3 talks. So the first talk, which will be the one that we're going to do today, is the foundational belief. And then in the next talk, I will talk about the Islamic concept of fitra, because it matches this idea of the foundational belief, and how through reason we can reach to to understanding of the existence of God. And the last part, I will talk also through reason how we can understand the oneness of God and the attributes of God. And then we will develop more of these talks in many other areas. So I'm going to start with the definition. So what is atheism, or what is atheist? Theist from theos in Greek is someone who believes in a god or gods. And atheist is someone who is not a theist. So A here is a negation, not. So atheist meaning who does not believe in a god or gods. But this atheist disbelief, there are 3 scenarios. You need to understand them, because the atheist that you're going to meet, whether a person who used to be a Muslim and turned into atheism, or a non-Muslim atheist, whomever, when you meet, you have to put them in the right box. There are 3 possibilities, 3 boxes. When someone says atheist, you need to find out, does it mean the one who describes himself or herself as an atheist has arguments in favor of atheism? Does he or she has an argument? Or does it mean that he or she doesn't have argument, but simply is not convinced about the theistic arguments, arguments that come from people of religion, whether Muslim or Christians or whatever? And the last one, you can come across people who say they're atheist and simply they've made a conscious decision not to believe in any God. It's not like they have done any research or they have any particular position. It's just simply they're not interested in the religion. Their way of life is just a hedonistic way of life, and they don't want to do anything with religion. So the first position makes a knowledge claim. Therefore, they must provide evidence. You should insist on they provide evidence. So what is your evidence? You should ask, what is your evidence for denying God? All right, because that should be the default question. The second position is more of agnostic. So there is a strong hope if you present with a good argument. I think this is people that you need to pay more attention to. And the third position is just an irrational, blind faith in atheism. Here there is a little hope. I'm not saying there's no hope, because Allah can, guide anyone. So there is a hope, but a little hope. But your discussion should focus on purpose of life and the importance of religion, rather than trying to prove to them first the existence of God. So theism, or belief in God, is, I make this claim now, is a rational and a natural position. And atheism, not believe in God, is irrational and is unnatural position. And I will try to explain this why. In the same way, it is rational and natural to believe in the reality of the past, or to believe in the law of causality, or to believe that other people have minds. These are natural and very rational things. You know, if a person comes and say, you know, yesterday it was just an illusion, you know, that will be something irrational and it will be something unnatural. And somebody has to explain why. So if you reject any of these propositions, you are both irrational and unnatural. Okay. Now, you can refer to many scientific studies from different disciplines on why belief in God is natural. And I have pointed out some few names, and you can do some research there. Now, we have to look at atheism through Islamic understanding, and we will develop our own framework for looking at it. So the traditional Islamic term for atheism is ilhad, which literally means deviation. So it implies that atheism is a deviation of what is natural. And that's why we say atheism is unnatural. And this is in line with the Quranic and prophetic teachings of fitrah, because the fitrah, you know, we as Muslims, we do believe that all human beings are born with an innate nature or state that acknowledges God. Okay, so that is natural. Okay, so if you are an atheist, you have this something unnatural because it's an aberration of the human psyche. Now, the Islamic doctrine of Tawheed, the oneness of God, considered any opposite of Tawheed as a shirk. Therefore, from Islamic point of view, atheism is also a form of shirk. And it is not surprising that the Quran, even though speaks about ilhad, you know, specifically in few places, but it focuses much more on shirk, because shirk is seen in the Quran as a major problem that drives humanity against submission to the will of God and against leading devotional life. So the Quran asserts that those who reject Creator are not certain, and describe those who reject monotheism as fools, which implies that polytheists, and by extension now atheists, are irrational and they are unwise.
أم خلقوا السماوات والأرض بل لا يوقنون ومن يرغب عن ملة إبراهيم إلا من سفه نفسه ولقد اصطفيناه في الدنيا وإنه في الآخرة لمن الصالحين.
Okay, therefore, the Islamic description of atheism, it is an unnatural worldview, and it is based on uncertainty and irrationality. This definition of atheism is not neutral because it assumes the existence of God, a creator. So the Quran does not accept atheism to be the default position. The default position is theism. Now, shirk as an antithesis or the opposite of tawheed can be committed in 4 areas. You could have shirk of divinity or uluhiyya, or shirk of lordship or rububiyyah, shirk of worship or budiyya, and shirk of attributes, asma wa sifat. Now, atheists, they commit all the 4 shirk, but more obvious shirk of lordship and attributes. Why? Because they are accrediting the origin of the universe and the origin of life to other than God. And they deny him the attributes of the creator as a creator and as a sustainer of the universe. So really, the way we need to approach atheism is the way we approach mushrikeen or shirk. Now, we need to develop our framework now. As a Muslim, the best way to approach atheism is to frame it in the Islamic frame of reference. Now, in the Islamic frame of reference, we have Tawheed and we have Shirk, which is opposite to Tawheed. Tawheed is unique to Islam, and it is what distinguishes Islam from all other religions, systems of beliefs, creeds, theologies, philosophies, ideology, all of this. And all of them, they carry some form of shirk in one way or another. So even Christianity will be considered as a form of shirk. Even Judaism, it is a form of shirk. Hinduism, Buddhism, all of these religions, they have form of shirk. Now, what atheists, they present to public, and this is what they think is their strong position as a common framing, the singularity of atheism against multiplicity of religion. Because they will tell you, if you want to believe in religion, so which religion are you going to believe? If you want to believe in God, which God is this? Is it a Greek God? Is it Yahweh? Is it, Hindu God? Is it Allah? Which God are you talking about? So we need really to defeat that. So the Islamic frame of reference, which is the correct framing, we have the singularity of Tawheed. And under Tawheed, we have only one religion, which is Islam, which is the correct religion in the Deen and Allah Islam, versus the multiplicity of shirk, which include all false religions, including atheism. So that's the framework that we should use. Now, the two facets of atheistic thought that are obviously contradictory to Islam will be related to where does the universe come from and what determine changes in the universe through time. Now, with Islamic Tawheed, it is very clear about where does the universe come from and what determine change in the universe through time. Allah is the creator and sustainer of the universe and everything in it. He is also the sole lawgiver of all the natural laws that govern the universe. So those who contradict this reality commit shirk. This is the point of atheists. There are many ways, and this is what we want to counter. There are many ways to disbelieve as there are to believe. This is our position. But there is only one correct creed, and that is Tawheed. Atheists claim that atheism is true and theism is false because of the singularity of atheism as opposed to the multiplicity of theism, and that's how they promote it. The truth is, atheism is just a big umbrella with many shades, grades, and categories of disbeliefs. On the right, you see, these are only some I highlighted. You have anti-theists, you have agnostics, you have humanist atheists, you have free thinkers, you have accommodationists, you have religious atheists, you have deists, you have pantheists, you have unaffiliated atheists. So there are many flavors of atheism. Not only that, atheists also, they differ in knowledge, in affirmation, in the scope of atheism, in openness, in religiosity, in their action. Some of them, they are very, they are activists, in promoting their disbeliefs. All right. So therefore, the Islamic frame of reference, singularity of Tawheed versus multiplicity of shirk, it really exposes and removes this false presumption of atheism. So we come to the question of default question. Many times when dealing with atheists, we have allowed ourselves to be put on the defensive position by entertaining their usual first question: does God exist? What proof do you have for God's existence? And we usually respond by presenting all the positive arguments for God's existence that we have. And the Muslims do have many different kinds of good arguments that support belief in God. And inshallah, we will cover in the future talks on this topic. So, because atheists possess no valid argument or arguments against existence of God, then the natural default position must be the belief in God. The atheist position of rejecting existence of God is unnatural. Therefore, we should not let atheists question, the atheist question of does God exist, or what proof do you have for God's existence, to become the default question. Instead, we should first probe into atheist position by asking them the correct default question. And this is the Quranic position also. What evidence do you have to reject God's existence? They have to explain to us first. So we describe many beliefs that self-evidently true, that are natural or true by default. If someone questions their truth, we usually do not blindly accept their arguments, but we probe him or her with a question: what evidence do you have to reject them? So existence of God is one such belief that is self-evident true or truth that can be described as natural or true by default. Therefore, theist position is the default position, and atheist position must be probed with the question: what evidence or what reason, you'd reject existence of God? So this comes to the idea of a foundational belief. And this is a good starting point for our journey to define a foundational belief. So what is a foundational belief? A foundational belief is a belief or a conviction that we have in our hearts and minds as true and natural, simply because it is self-evident truth that requires no proof. And it has these 5 characteristics. It's universal because it's not limited to particular culture or social condition. It is untaught. It doesn't require external information transfer. It is natural because it is really a normal functioning of the human psyche, the human mind and the human soul. And it's intuitive. It's easiest and simplest interpretation of the world. And it is incorrigible. It cannot be disproved or annulled. Now, let's make an example to make this thing more clear. For example, the belief in the reality of the past, that the past is real. We had yesterday and we went to sleep and we woke up this morning, and we know yesterday it was real. We remember what we have done yesterday, So this belief, we cannot prove it. There is no any scientific way to prove that yesterday is real. There is no way. But yet we believe in it as a foundational belief. And it is universal because it is not limited to any particular culture. Chinese, they know yesterday existed. If you go to Europeans, if you go to Africans, if you go to Muslim, if you go to Christian, whatever the whole spectrum of humanity, they all accept this. You may find maybe some few crazy people who will say yesterday it was just an illusion in your mind, but if you get somebody saying that, they have to explain why they think that way. We should not prove, we should not engross ourselves in trying to prove that yesterday is real. It is untaught because nobody actually taught us to think yesterday was real. It is something natural. It is untaught. Our parents didn't teach us. We came to know ourselves. And it is natural because, it doesn't require any special way to acquire it. If you ask me about, for example, spaghetti, I need to acquire, it is not natural to me because I need to understand, maybe something about Italian and something about food and, to understand what is spaghetti. But I don't need any kind of special thing to acquire the understanding of the reality of the past. And of course, it is a very intuitive interpretation of the world. and you cannot disprove it. So this is the meaning or the understanding of what is foundational belief. Now, in Islam, faith in the existence of God is the foundational belief. It is the self-evident truth which is natural and requires no proof. And the Quran, confirms this, and it says, "Can there be doubt about God, creator of the heavens and earth?" Because this is something natural. It's natural with the human being. Even for those who do not understand the meaning of fitrah, it is also natural. There are many examples of foundational beliefs that we are all taking for granted in our hearts and minds, including atheists and scientists as well. For example, the reality of the external world. We cannot prove it scientifically, but we do believe of the external world. We do believe in the uniformity of nature. We do believe in the intelligibility of nature. We do believe the law of causality. Everything that we see around us, we know there must be a designer. We cannot just come across something, and say, it just came by itself. All right. The validity of reasoning also. Our reason, we have confidence of our reason. Where does that confidence come from? We cannot prove it, but it is a foundational belief. Even the idea that truth is worth seeking, these scientists and atheists, what they are engrossed in, it's also a belief, it's a foundational belief. So in the same way, belief in the existence of God is a transcendental creator, sustainer of this universe, is self-evident truth, which is natural and requires no proof. So belief in the existence of God is not only foundational, but it is necessary for human beings to make sense of the universe, to make sense of life in this world, to make sense of the nature around us, to make sense of our consciousness and our rational mind, and also to anchor our morals and our ethics. All right, because if we don't believe in God, we have big problem, very, very big problem. Any explanation of the reality of the universe and life that does not recognize existence of one living God, the creator, the sustainer of the universe, is flawed, all right, is flawed in its foundation. Therefore, the new atheist worldview, which is built on the premises that God does not exist, nothing is beyond the physical material world, and the only way to arrive to reality, knowledge and truth is through empirical science, it is flawed, it is misguiding, it is unnatural, it is irrational, and it is not default state of the mind. Those who follow atheistic worldview or mindset that denies existence of God not only have difficulty to explain about the origin of the universe and all creations in it, but also about the origin of human life, its meaning, its value, and its purpose. To prove something existing requires a positive proof by simply pointing to the sign of its existence or presence, which is easy, but to prove something non-existing requires a negative proof by exhaustively searching for its non-existence or absence, which is very difficult. So for Muslim, it's very easy to prove existence of God because all what we have to do is to provide positive proof. But for atheists, it must be very difficult for them because they need to provide negative proof. This is the difference between us. Now, the Quran teaches us to ponder on positive proofs for existence of God. For example, you have in
سنريهم آياتنا في الآفاق وفي أنفسهم حتى يتبين لهم أنه الحق أولم يكف بربك أنه على كل شيء شهيد.
So this is the basis of the positive proofs which the Quran teaches us, and in this verse in Surah 41, verse 53. But also there are many other places. For example, in Surah 88, verse 17.
أفلا ينظرون إلى الإبل كيف خلقت وإلى السماء كيف رفعت وإلى الجبال كيف نصبت وإلى الأرض كيف سطحت.
Okay, so atheists will need to produce negative proofs for their denial of existence of God, because it is a difficult task, if not impossible, to produce such proofs against the existence of God. They have been hiding behind the science and the liberalism. New atheist intellectuals, they argue that in order to accept the idea of God to be true, there must be a way of confirming the reality of God through science, independent of faith, because all true knowledge only comes from scientific inquiries. Now, if faith in God requires independent scientific confirmation, what about the gigantic faith these new atheists place on science itself? What is the independent confirmation that could provide evidence for this flawed epistemology that all true knowledge only comes from scientific inquiry? This is a question. This is a counter argument that we need to present. If the new atheists cannot accept the knowledge that came from the divine revelation, what about the many other channels through which we daily come to know, experience, understand the world? For example, what is the evidence, of a love between two persons, which cannot be measured or objectively proved by science, even though it is real? The only way anyone can encounter the subjectivity depth of another person's feeling, whether it's happiness or sadness or love or hate or fear or calmness or anger or humor, is to abandon the objective method of natural science. In fact, to treat the subjectivity of another person as though it is just another object in nature is both morally and ethically wrong. Therefore, to encounter with another person's subjective depth, it challenges one to put aside the objectifying methods and enjoy the interpersonal experience. Likewise, to have an encounter with a great work of art or with the beauty of nature, one will miss the aesthetic evidence completely unless one abandons the objectivity of science and allow oneself to be captivated by it. Therefore, do these new atheists seriously believe the evidence for existence of personal God, of infinite beauty and unbounded love could be gathered cheaply by a scientific hypothesis? It is interpersonal experience and logical reason, not the impersonal objectivity of science, will be essential, the way to know, to understand and experience God, and being present and conscious of Him. So we reject this idea that existence of God is hypothesis, because that's the strategy of new atheists, is to seduce their audience into agreeing that belief in the existence of God is a faith hypothesis that functions for believers in the same way as scientific hypothesis does for scientists. So a constant catchphrase from them is, the fundamental problem with faith is that it is based on no evidence or insufficient evidence. Therefore, it must be rejected. Science, by contrast, can point to countless reproducible observations that support its hypothesis. And a good scientist is willing to give up or modify, his or her scientific hypothesis if the experiment requires doing so. But the faithful, they cling to their faith hypothesis, no matter how non-existent the evidence. Science cannot detect or rule out existence of God. Because God's existence is not a hypothesis. When we say science cannot detect the divine, it doesn't mean that God is out of the mind's and heart's range. At a usual tacit level of awareness, both atheists and theists participate in a common faith. They all believe that the reality is intelligible and the truth is worth seeking, and that life has meaning and purpose, and that people should behave moral and ethical. All of these are matter of faith, even for the atheists. So what we differ, theists know, as believers, we know as part of our human nature that there exists a God, an infinite being who possesses power, will, knowledge, truth, reality, meaning, goodness, and beauty. So new atheists bend to the level of silliness as implied in their caricature understanding of God and religion. Because you need to listen to them, the way they understand God and religion is different from the way we understand God and religion. At the foundation of every human search for truth and understanding, including the scientific search that our new atheist friends are bragging about, there is a deep-rooted element of trust. If you find yourself, you are doubting this statement I've just said to you, it is only because at this very moment you trust your own mind enough to express concern about this assertion. So it means that, you trust your mind. It means that you have faith in your mind. So you cannot avoid trusting your mind and its intellectual capacity, even if you are in doubt. So trust is just another word for faith in theology, and only a little reflection will convince you that every inquiry of every human endeavor emerges from the murkiness of some sort of faith, without necessarily an objective scientific empirical evidence. So even if you believe that seeking truth is worthwhile, which most of us do, the idea is founded on faith because you cannot prove it. And even if you attempt to do so, you already presupposes faith. All right. So new atheist intellectuals place enormous trust in their own power of reason in their refutation of God and religion. They make tacit act of faith in their own critical intelligence, but without providing us with any good and independent reason as to why they should trust their mind to lead themselves and us to the truth. They simply believe blindly in the presumed superior capacity of their own mind to find truth, and in the presumed poor capacity of the minds of people whom they think are misguided by religious faith. In order to be a reliable guide for the rest of us, they must trust their mind, that they can put us in touch with the reality that is simple or simply blind faith. Also, the new atheist's own belief system of scientific naturalism logically undermines validity of reason. If our minds have evolved from a mindless state of nature, why should we trust these same minds to put us in touch with the reality? In order to justify validity of our reasoning, something must have come outside the scientific naturalism of Darwinian evolution. For if our minds are nothing but the accidental outcome of a mindless and purposeless evolution, why then should we trust our minds at all? New atheists have failed to explain about human consciousness and the human mind through the scientific naturalism. Now, does theology matter? No, you'll be surprised that most of these new atheists, if you look at their books, if you read their books and if you look at their engagement in public speaking, they have not studied and researched about the theologies of religions. When it comes to Islam, they are totally ignorant and foolish. They describe Islam at its absolute ugliest. What Islam and devoted Muslims considered as the most objectionable practices, such as oppression of women, racism, injustice on others, violence, extremism. These, what sums up for them is what Islam is really all about. So new atheists do not care at all whether theologians read their books or not. They will prefer not, actually, because they are not writing for theologians, but they're writing for the masses of uninformed readers to keep them away from religion. So new atheism fully relies on and borrows from religious concepts in their discourse, yet they attack and ridicule the very same fountain that they drink from. None of the writers Dr. Yusuf, anything that I need to intervene? No.
No, I've done the intervention, so okay. That's fine. You have 7 minutes.
7 minutes. I started late, Sheikh. You have to,
okay, no worries. Go ahead.
You give me 10 minutes, all right? None of the writers of New Atheism exhibit scholarly expertise in the rich tradition of Islamic studies, theologies, exegesis, and jurisprudence. And in their position and rejection of Islam, they do not rely on scholarly reputation or philosophical reason. They're just being obnoxious, arrogant. They attack, they rely on deceptions and ridicules. And sometimes they confuse from the few extremists who misuse religion from the benevolent teaching of the religion itself, not recognizing that the worst of crimes in recent history against humanity were actually perpetrated by atheists and their atheistic paradigms. You know, if you make references of what happened to Marxism and communism and, you know, others, okay, people can refer to history. They also accuse Muslims of extremism and intolerance, but they scarcely notice the irony in their own extremism or extremist and intolerance behavior. So the paradox, you know, of atheistic worldview, there is a paradox in atheistic worldview. One can tell the world that he or she is an atheist, but he or she can never live like one. You know, they can tell I'm atheist and all that, but they cannot live like atheists, because an atheist may claim to be a disbeliever, but can only live a partial life of a believer, a life of meaning, of value and purpose. We find that some of them, they have meaningful life. They have at least the worldly life, not the akhirah. They're not working for the akhirah, but for the worldly life. You know, some of them, they do have meaningful life. They have some values, and they have some goals, you know, in this life. Where do they get this from? Because without God, the physical universe is all there is, and human beings are just accidental byproduct of mindless and purposeless nature, not intentionally designed or created, but appeared by chance. If there was no intention to create a human being, then there is no purpose for human being. So if God does not exist, it does not matter what one believes or what choices one makes in life. Living kind, generous, thoughtful, and devotional life, or living horrible, violent, selfish, immoral, hedonistic life will have been the same. Irrespective, our lives will have no objective meaning, value, or purpose. And if God does not exist, there is no absolute standard of moral value. New atheists have failed to explain the objective basis of their moral value. Where do they get these moral values from? So this is just a summary. Alhamdulillah, I think I managed to get to the end. This is a summary of what I've said today. I've said the rise of atheism should be an issue of our concern, as it is affecting Muslim youth and it is affecting dawah as well, to invite non-Muslim into Islam. Not only the atheists, but even people of other religions, you know, or people who do, you know, who have no religion, you know, because the discourse, the atheist discourse, you know, their arguments are all in the public domain, and they, especially post 9/11, the new atheists, they really focus everything against Islam, and therefore we really need to, to be able to be concerned and to be able to respond. Their presence in the social media is huge, and therefore many of the Dawah activities, I think, need to shift also into these platforms, social media platforms. Atheism did not come out of the blue. It has 400 years of history in Europe. It died in the 20th century and was resuscitated in the 21st century after 9/11. Atheism is unnatural, irrational, and it's a form of shirk. The correct framing should be singularity of Tawheed against multiplicity of shirk, which includes all false religions, and atheism is included. Faith in God is the foundational belief. It is a self-evident truth. It requires no proof, and therefore it is the human's default state. Even though we do have proof, but it doesn't require proof as a default state. So people should not question us first. Why do you believe in God? Those who don't believe in God, we should question them first. Why do they reject God? Atheists' demand of scientific evidence for God's existence, independent of faith, is both illogical and contradictory. Their naturalist worldview and their scientism and the validity of reason cannot be independently verified. Other channels of knowing have always existed. Faith is needed always, even in science. Existence of God is not a hypothesis. Knowing God is through interpersonal experience and reason. No one can truly live a theistic life, and the atheists cannot explain the basis of their moral behavior. Without God, no one can make sense of the universe and life will have no meaning, value, or purpose. And it will matter how you live your life, whether you live your life in a positive way or you live in a negative way. Atheist scientific naturalism undermines the validity of reason. So how can you trust minds that have long evolved accidentally from mindless and purposeless matter? And atheists cannot explain the real origin of human mind and human consciousness. Shukran.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Hafidh. Excellent talk, mashallah. Very informative, a lot of knowledge there. Jazakallah khair. A quick question before I allow others if they have any other comments or questions to make. This was part one. Can you just give us a sort of an attraction to part two? What are you going to cover in part two?
Okay, part two, we will discuss a little bit more about fitra, more detail beyond what normally a Muslim capture this idea of fitra. And because this will be in line with the idea of foundational belief. And then we'll go into trying to reach to the conclusion of existence of God through reason. So mainly that will be the focus for the second part. The third part, we will look into the oneness of God. So how can we arrive to the oneness of God as well? And the attributes of God, also through reason, not relying on the text in the Quran and in the Hadith. Because this is targeted for those people who do not accept the scripture. Because if they don't accept the scripture, how are you going to be able to engage them? So we have to engage them through reason. So that's what's the highlights.
Excellent, Sheikh Hafidh. Jazakallah khair. Anybody has a question or comment to make quickly? We can give another 5 minutes or so.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
جزاك الله خير Sheikh, mashallah, it was a really informative lecture. My question is, do you think they really believe or they just want to deviate people from the truth?
The targeting, because you know, it is probably in their heart, because everybody must have fitra. So the fitra will not disappear in human beings completely. So there must be some level of belief in their soul. There must be, but because it is connected to liberalism and the secularism, really it's a promotion of secularism and liberalism. Therefore, they want to take people away from religion, and especially the Muslims, because you know, they have been able to deconstruct Christianity completely. And many Christians now, they are just Christian by culture, not as a faith. But they find a lot of resistance in Islam and Muslims. Muslims are still, you know, conservative, and they still cling on their faith, and they are still try to lead the devotional life. So this is what they want to do for Muslims, but also they want to make sure the Muslim propagation of Islam, it doesn't, they want to defeat it. It does, you know, they don't want other people to, you know, to look at the option of Islam. So that's the reason. Okay. Has it answered your question, inshallah, Sister Sheikha?
Yes, Jazakallah khair.
I think there's a, Tina has raised hand, I think, or Sister Tina.
Yeah, shukran, Sheikh Hafidh. Thank you very much. This was very good, and it will help a lot to answer some question or speak how to speak with those so-called atheism. But also, I feel many, they become atheists not because they don't they believe that they don't believe that God exists, but they get away because they want to be out of responsibility. Because when you accept that God does exist, then you have to follow what God has instructed. But if I don't want, I want to live my own life without any accountability, then I just denounce that, you know, this doesn't exist. So deep down, many of them, they do believe, but because they want to live their life as they want, so that's how they want to get away with pretending of not existing of God.
I agree with you, Sister Tina, and that's why in the first slide, I said that you have to put an atheist in these three different boxes. And if you remember, the third box is when somebody just rejects because they don't want to have anything to do with religion, because they don't want, of course, responsibility. They want to live a hedonistic life. And that's exactly the reason. So you really need to find it. That what you have explained is only one way of looking at their disbelief.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, I think we'll bring it to a close. Jazakallah khair. Barakallah fik. I think there is a question or no, it's just a comment. No, there is a comment also that they could be also confused rather than actually so confused between the work of God and work of man when it comes to wars, hunger, destruction that we see, the suffering. So that brings them to a conclusion basically that if God existed, this shouldn't be the case. Or the other was, that's a comment actually coming from one of the sisters. She has sent it as a text.
Yeah, yeah, Sister Hanam, I think it's a valid comment, and we will address, because this is just a beginning. Today, we just scratch the surface. And mainly, I wanted to put a foundation so that you know, subsequent talks, inshallah, we will address many different aspects and we'll go into details to the level where we can take home something that we can use it in our engagement with this kind of people, inshallah.
Very good. So I think we'll bring this to a close. We're already over our time limit. Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Hafidh, for this excellent talk, for all the participants as well. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you next Friday. We'll see if we can arrange actually for Sheikh Hafidh to continue on part 2 on this. We have a schedule, but we will try if we can reschedule other things. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.